Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have a single story by the name of I Did Something Terrible and Now It Won't Leave Me Alone. I know you guys really like the occasional single story upload, and that is exactly what this one is. If you do enjoy the video, please be sure to drop a like rating. It only takes a quick second, and it helps out the channel immensely. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated, as I post stuff just like this all of the time. Also, if you're wondering why I'm wearing the same clothes as the last video, it's because it's still the same night for me. I've just been sitting here for hours at this point, just recording scary stories, just having a good time, drinking some Monster, not alcohol. And yeah, it's a vibe. I don't really have anything planned for Halloween night, so I'm just trying to spam your feeds with as much horror stories as I can. Anyway, with all that being said, enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. How could I be so stupid? Out of all the days to get caught up in work, and today had to be the day I forgot. Work was really stressful at the moment. What with us getting a new boss and all, and I was up to my neck in paperwork. Then I spilled my coffee on my new suit, and literally 10 minutes later, the office printer jammed. Brilliant. Fucking brilliant. I honestly thought it couldn't get any worse when my phone rang. I answered in an exasperated voice. Yes, this is Samuel Hayes. Can I put you on hold for a minute, please? I'm quite preoccupied. Dad, it's me. Reuben's voice said. I stopped, my mind drawing away from work. I wondered why my son would be calling me. Before the realization hit me like a gunshot, I cursed silently and considered lying for a moment, then decided against it. It was best for me to be honest. Oh no, Reuben, I'm so sorry. You don't have to say it. Daddy forgot, didn't he? I spoke in a soft voice. As Reuben responded, I could see him doing that adorable, exaggerated nod he always did, shaking his head back and forth so vigorously that his hair looked like a bird's beating wings. Yeah, and you promised you wouldn't this time too. I know I did, I said regretfully. Daddy made a mistake. He's been very, very busy. Oh, Reuben, I'm so sorry. I'll get going right now. But hey, happy birthday. 8 years old. What a big kid you've become, huh? Yeah. Reuben sounded cheerful. Did you get those shoes I wanted? The ones with the rainbow laces and the bottoms that glow in the dark? I asked. Then I almost swore into the phone. I forgot the fucking shoes, too. Damn it. If only Maud, my late wife, was still here. She was so much better at handling children than I was. Mm-hmm, Reuben agreed. I told him I'd see him soon, then hung up the phone. I checked the time. 4:34 p.m. That shoe store closed at 5. If I hurried, I might just make it. I jumped from my seat, promising my boss I'd work overtime tomorrow to compensate, then dashed out the door. I hurtled down the highway in my car, oblivious to the blaring horns of angry drivers around me. I'd already missed my kid's birthday twice and forgotten to get him a present God knows how many times. Not today. I wasn't letting him down. My phone began to ping alive as I drove. I regarded the texts briefly. It was my girlfriend, Jasmine. My eyes picked up fragments of sentences. Landlord can't. Sorry to burden you. Could I stay over? Couple of days. Handle Reuben while you're... blah, blah, blah. It's alright, Jasmine, I thought. You can stay over whenever you want. I'd be more than happy for you to move in, honestly. I continued to pick up speed. The cars becoming blurs as I whizzed past them. I spoke to my phone. Hey Siri, text Jasmine, mobile. Okay, what would you like to say? Siri's cool voice popped up from my car stereo. Be my guest. Also, it is Reuben's birthday, I said. I glanced down at the phone, the addictive glow of the screen attracting my eyes only briefly. Then I looked up again and saw the oncoming back of the truck. My foot slammed down on the brakes as I swerved out of my lane. I heard the squeal of more tires behind me and the shrieking sounds of contorting metal and covered my ears. Thunderous booming and glass shattering surrounded me for a second, maybe two, but it felt like an eternity. Then it died down just as quickly. I slowly looked up and gazed at my hands, turning them over. Still alive. Good. In fact, the car seemed untouched. I looked behind me, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Cars upturned, one mounting the cement barrier, glass littering the ground. Blood. Dear God, why was there blood? My eyes followed the visceral scarlet spray across the asphalt and came to rest on a person. Legs, a torso, arms, and no head. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the sight, my hands beginning to shake on the wheel. There was no fucking head. The corpse was soaked in blood like they'd swum through a pool of it. Their limbs were cracked like rotted tree branches, twisting in bizarre and impossible directions. Skin was scratched away, leaving bloody strips like confetti behind. And there was the head, sitting perfectly upright only a meter or so away, staring at me. Dear God, it was staring at me. It was a woman's head. Mottled brown hair tainted black and crimson. Dead gray eyes, the color fading from them, staring straight at me, accusingly. They were so cold, like marbles. Gray, stupid-looking eyeballs. One was slowly clouding with blood, filling like a goddamn sink. Your message reads, be my guest. I shrieked, flying against my seat. Siri's dead calm voice continued. Also, it is Reuben's birthday. Would you like me to send? I sat breathing heavily for multiple seconds, not sure what to do. Distantly, I heard a car door cautiously pop open. That did it for me. I slowly started forwards, maneuvering around the few parked cars ahead of me. Then, when I was clear of the stationary traffic, I picked up speed again. I drove automatically, not really thinking. I turned off the highway, proceeding deeper into the city. I reached the shoe store at 4:55 p.m. Like a zombie, I headed mindlessly inside. I gave the employees my son's foot size and was given the appropriate shoes with the rainbow laces. I paid the clerk, then walked silently back to the car to visit the nearest bakery. I needed a cake, too. I plastered on a smile when I reached home and wished my son a happy birthday. He hugged me warmly, wrapping his tiny arms around my waist. I felt the warmth and it sent a familiar, fatherly tingle of happiness up my spine. I wanted to vomit. When I gave my son his shoes, he squealed with delight. They were a perfect fit. I made some kind of joke, something to do with Cinderella and how I'd always know how to find my kid now. It was a terrible joke and didn't even make sense, but Reuben laughed. kids. They'll laugh at anything. So innocent and pure. I really wanted to vomit. Jasmine came by with her things a few hours later. I let her in and told her Reuben was already asleep. We went upstairs to my bed, and Jasmine gave me a romantic offer I often accepted with excitement. I refused. We slept together that night, Jasmine's arms slowly wrapping around me lovingly. They hugged me close. I felt the heat of her arms, the warmth of compassion and affection radiating. A sickening and muggy aura. I swallowed and went to the bathroom, where I vomited. I don't think Jasmine heard it. She must have already fallen asleep. I crawled weakly back into bed after brushing my teeth again. The warmth of the bed, still as sweet as I remembered when sharing it with another person, began to slowly send me to sleep. I stared at the window above me, letting in peaceful silver moonlight, beaming down on me and Jasmine's sleeping bodies. My last thought before sleep took over was, what have I done? When I awoke the next morning, I'd completely forgotten about the events of yesterday. I told Jasmine I'd make breakfast, then went to wake up Reuben for school. I headed into his room, but the bed was empty. Strange, I thought. I found him in the lounge on my way to the kitchen, still in his pajamas. Jesus, the kid looked like death. His hair looked like a bird's nest, strands of hair going in every which direction, and the bags on his eyes looked almost painted on. He seemed paler than usual, too, as he sat hunched over on the couch. He hardly ever regarded me when I found him. "Morning, Reuben. You okay there, buddy?" I asked. Reuben didn't answer. "Okay. You want pancakes for breakfast?" Still no response. I shrugged it off. Like the oblivious father I was, I picked up the remote, switched on the TV, and speak of the devil. The crash resulted in the injury of 7 people and 1 fatality. Police are ruling out the possibility of it being a traffic accident, and are now calling it a traffic collision, as eyewitnesses report a black sedan swerved in front of oncoming traffic before driving away unscathed. Authorities are yet to determine who the driver of the vehicle was. I almost dropped the remote on the floor. I steadied myself against the couch to collect my nerves and swallowed multiple times. My throat was sealing up astoundingly quickly. I tried to hold my nerves together, but my hands were shaking like I was handling a jackhammer. I prepared a shakily made breakfast and told Reuben to get ready for school. He noiselessly went to get dressed. The moment Reuben had gone back upstairs, I headed to the guest bathroom, locked the door, and completely broke down. I took in hitching gasps, tears streaking down my face. How nice it'd be to wake up right now and find it was all a dream. But I did not wake up. This was real life. I had killed a person. I pulled myself together, washed my red and blotchy face in the sink, and that made me think of her eye again, filling up with blood. That blank, gray eye staring straight into me. Not now. Keep it together. I headed back into the kitchen and helped Reuben get ready for school. I tied his rainbow shoelaces and told him to be nice with the other kids, then saw him out to his bus stop across the street. When I got back, Jasmine was now in the kitchen making herself a cup of coffee. "Hey, Jasmine. I'm gonna have to stay late at work today. I'll be back at 9 at the latest," I explained. Jasmine rolled her eyes. "Of course. Why are you staying late this time? Compensating for leaving early again?" A knot slowly grew in my stomach. "Well, yeah. Had to get something for Reuben," I explained. For Forget his birthday again?" Jasmine asked. The knot tightened. "Guilty as charged." I forced a smile. "Anyway, feel free to order pizza tonight. Have a nice afternoon with Reuben." I left shortly afterwards and headed to work. By the time I got there, the distracting and frantic world of work drove my mind away from yesterday. I completed several papers, talked to multiple clients, and got friendly with my new boss on my lunch break. It was only when I sat back down at my desk that I realized something was strange. There was a man dressed in a suit standing on the other side of the office. He had his back to me and faced the wall, unmoving. Earlier in the day, when I'd been darting back and forth, I was sure the man was already there, but we were in an office, so men in suits were everywhere. Heck, I was in a suit. But looking at him now, I thought it was odd. I thought back. I'd been going to get something from the printer, which was working again, thank the gods. That was around roughly 10 a.m., and the man was already there by then. I glanced at him only once, wondered if I knew him, then picked up my papers from the printer and headed back to my desk. It was now 1 p.m. The man hadn't moved an inch. Even looking at him, he didn't seem to be moving at all. No rise and fall of the chest. No general wobbling of the arms or head. I had it in my mind that he might just be a mannequin someone set up as a joke. As the day dragged on, more and more people began to see themselves out. Finally, it was just me left working overtime as I completed an email to send to a colleague who was out of town. I looked through the glass wall of my office and across the length of the workplace. And what the hell? "Excuse me, sir. You alright?" I called out. The man in the suit still stood exactly where he had been for hours on end. If my memory served right, this guy had been standing there for 8.5 hours. 8.5 fucking hours, and he hadn't moved at all. When the man didn't respond, I stood from my desk. With no people left, minus the two of us, the workplace felt uncomfortable now. The atmosphere was the same. A pleasant, cool temperature lingered, and the office chairs and desks were all neatly aligned and visually appealing. Everything was organized. The lights were working fine, and you couldn't feel safer in an environment like that. But I didn't feel safe at all. "Sir?" I continued, cautiously exiting my office. Was this guy okay? I made my way towards him, continuing to call out, "Sir, is everything okay? I see you've been in the same place for a while now. Do you need help?" What happened next? I can't easily explain. I was a couple meters from him, still asking if he was okay, when suddenly he shot to the side and out of sight. Like an invisible force just grabbed this guy and aggressively hauled him sideways as his arms and legs flailed behind him. It was so fast and so sudden I almost fell over. The movement was grotesque in a way I can't quite describe. The way he just fucking flew like that. It sounds almost comedic, but I assure you it wasn't. It was horrifying. "What the fuck?" I cried out. I sped around the corner he'd vanished behind, but there was nothing. It was just an empty hallway. No one there. I shook my head in total disbelief. Dude, seriously? What the fuck? Confused as all hell, I backed away from the hallway and cautiously approached my office again, keeping my eye behind me. I went to grasp the handle, but found only air. Looking over, I found that the door was wide open. Did I leave that open? I wondered. Didn't matter. I was too freaked out and confused to worry about this right now. I just needed to pack up my stuff and get the heck out of here. I entered my office, grabbing what I needed and sweeping a coffee cup into the bin, then turned to shut off my computer. What I saw made me freeze. My email was still open and half completed, except now there was a new sentence. A sentence that I sure as hell didn't write. I gazed at the few words that were written there, gripping my stuff the same way a child holds a teddy bear to their chest. I knew exactly who the sentence was referring to. It made me feel sick to my stomach, and the knot from that morning came back, tightening harder than ever. My heart was pounding in my chest harder than I could imagine possible, and every hair on my neck was standing up. What the fuck? I gasped in a voice unlike my own, warped and wheezing with a primal fear I didn't even know existed. What the fuck? A moment later, I doubled over and violently hurled up my lunch into the bin, wiping my mouth and shaking severely. I crawled over to the computer's cord beneath the desk and unplugged it. I couldn't deal with this right now. I couldn't bear it. The guilt, the shame, the head, the bloody head. Its hair turned black and mottled with blood, staring straight at me. Those eyes, those dead, stupid, opaque eyes, the life draining out of them like water in a bathtub, staring at me, staring right at me. I stood on legs that shook like jelly and promptly exited the office. I'd handle my mess left in the bin in the morning. Right now, I needed to go home. I needed to get the hell out of here and away from whatever that thing was, because what that sentence said confirmed a nagging fear at the back of my mind. A fear that arose when I acknowledged how long that man had been standing there for. A fear about who he was and why he was here. A fear that made me clammy and more terrified than ever before. The sentence said, her name was Agatha Pearson. My paranoia seemed to be getting to me. Everywhere I turned, I was seeing it more prominently than ever. The same figure, sleek black hair, a sharp black suit, black trousers, shiny black shoes, and pale skin. Everywhere. Increasingly and harrowingly everywhere. When I got home that night, I had my second encounter with him. I gave my girlfriend a hug, but avoided kissing her on the cheek due to my being sick, and asked how my kid was. Weird you mentioned that, actually. I've been meaning to tell you. The school called home this afternoon. They said Reuben fell asleep in class. Apparently he fell off his chair and hit his head pretty hard on the floor. Jasmine explained. I flinched. Jesus, poor Reuben. Is he alright? Well, he seemed dead tired. I had to practically carry him upstairs and put him straight to bed. Jasmine shook her head. I told her I'd go check on him shortly, then went to grab a couple leftover slices of pizza that had been spared by Jasmine's full stomach and Reuben's weary state. I glanced at the TV, which was still playing, and there he was. A reporter standing on a dock overlooking the sea was explaining something, and as the camera panned to show the waters, there was just a man in a suit, standing further down from the camera. He stood right at the edge of the docks, staring down at the black and inky waters below. As I watched, he slowly started to lean, then pitched forward entirely, disappearing into the icy black sea with a heavy splash. The water settled, bubbles deteriorated. Time passed, but the man did not resurface. The sea remained calm. the cameraman and reporter somehow not noticing a person attempting to drown themselves. Knowing damn well it was the same man, despite common sense attempting to disagree, I hurriedly switched off the TV. That sickly feeling of nausea, the swelling and overpowering guilt, accompanied with that knot in my stomach returning, my knees beginning to shake. I was worried I was going to be ill all over again. Still, I resisted the urge and tried to act natural through the rest of the night. The following day, I cleaned out my mess in the dumpster behind my office building and tried to press through work as usual. Still, the sense of something just being wrong stuck with me. I consistently felt the hair on the back of my neck go up for no apparent reason, and more than once I could have sworn I felt the sense of someone being in the office with me. But whenever I checked, my office was empty, but the scent did not leave. Not once. I saw him again on my lunch break. I sat talking to my boss. We'd both learned the other had young children, and were gossiping about how difficult it was to raise them. When I glanced at the window behind her, it showed our reflections, the back of my boss's blonde, silky hair, and my perplexed and momentarily amused face. There he was, standing only a foot behind me, turned away as usual. I thought for a split second that he was just a fellow coworker, but of course he wasn't. I turned around, confused as to how he snuck up behind me without my boss greeting him, but of course, there was no one. Shaken, I just tried to press through my day. I considered going to see a therapist. What would they say? That I was schizophrenic? That this was all a psychotic breakdown? Was it some form of trauma following what I'd done? I hadn't even gone to the police about it, but I didn't want to go to jail for a simple mistake. There was nothing I could do about it. It was just an accident. That's all it was. Just an accident. He was down in the parking lot next. As I walked across the asphalt in the afternoon light, I glanced in the general direction of my car, and there he was, looking out towards the road beyond, just still, just totally fucking still, calm as could be, like this was all a joke, a goddamn joke, like he wasn't affecting a person's life by doing this. A moment later, a van drove between us, and by the time I could see my car again, he was gone. Shaking my head, I cautiously approached my sedan. I jimmied the handle to ensure it was locked, then furtively checked through the windows to make sure the asshole wasn't hiding in the footwell or the boot. Satisfied, I headed home again, but I couldn't stop shaking now. My palms felt slick and sweaty on the wheel, and I found myself constantly checking the rear view and wing mirrors to make sure he wasn't following me home. More than once I could have sworn I saw him, but only for an instant. Jesus, this was getting to me. Reuben finally looked like he'd gotten some sleep when I got home, but those heavy bags still sat under his eyes, and his gaze was unfocused and glazed. He sat at the kitchen table, a sheet of homework in front of him. He'd hardly touched it. I drummed on the table with my fingers as I walked by, saying, "Hey Reuben, you okay there, buddy? Seems like you've been having a rough few days." Reuben didn't respond. I sighed, checked out my window to make sure the man wasn't on the street, then sat down across from my Ken. "Kiddo, you're gonna have to talk to me, alright? What you're doing is ignoring people, and it's not very nice." Reuben's gaze shifted to me. "Sorry, Dad. I've been sleeping poorly." "Well, I'm sorry about that. Maybe let's try and talk a little. See if that makes you a little more chipper. Like those shoes, for example. Does everyone like those rainbow laces?" I asked. Reuben shrugged. I sighed, trying again. Okay. Did you learn anything interesting today? Reuben held eye contact with me, but still seemed unable to respond. Damn, the kid just wasn't all together here, was he? Look, Reuben, is something wrong? Is there a reason you haven't been sleeping well? I inquired. Reuben nodded. When I gestured for him to continue, he said, It's that man, Dad. He's been standing over my bed for 2 nights. He never looks at me, but I can't look away from him. Every muscle in my body froze. The world seemed to become hazier, swimming slightly. I steadied myself against the table and took in a sharp breath. I asked in a voice very much unlike my own. A man? Mm-hmm. In a suit, like you. Reuben flopped his head back and forth. I almost threw something across the fucking table. I asked him why he couldn't look away from the man, but I didn't even want to hear the answer. Because he keeps talking in a voice that's not a voice. Telling me things. Bad things. Reuben said. He says things about you, Daddy. He says that you killed someone. I couldn't do this. The broken glass, the thick mat of blood, the shattered corpse, the head. The head. I told Reuben he was being silly in a strangely calm voice. I then calmly informed Jasmine that I was heading out, got in my car and drove aimlessly around the neighborhood. My head was spinning with regret, with guilt, with the head, with the man, with Reuben. He's after Reuben too. I thought, he's after Reuben too. I don't know what to do about it. I don't know what the fuck to do about it. I began the drive back to my house, and there he was. My headlights fell upon him in the evening gloom, causing me to slow down. He stood facing away from me as always, looking down the road. I sat in my car staring at him. My hands shook, and if I checked the rearview mirror, I'm sure I would have seen all the color draining out of my face. My breathing began to quicken. I began to mutter, fear overriding my senses. Then I stopped. Fear was slowly replaced by rage. Who the hell did this guy think he was anyway? With all this shitty disappearing acts and his screwing around with the TV? No, I was done with this. Angrily rolling down my window, I stuck my head into the cool air and raised my voice. Hey, you asshole. Just who the hell do you think you are anyway? I don't know how you pulled that little stunt from the TV, or how the hell you're getting around my office like that, but this shit needs to stop. My kid, huh? Now you think you can just go after my goddamn kid? No, screw that, and screw you. I'll call the fucking cops on you if I see you one more goddamn time, you hear me? I yelled. I had it in my mind just to run this creep over right here, right now. God knows he deserves it. As if he actually registered my words, the man swiveled to the left and began to move off to the side of the road. The way he moved was far too uncanny for my liking, though. He looked like he'd been recorded walking backwards, before the video was reversed to create the illusion that he was walking forwards again. The way his legs just hitched up and smoothened themselves out, pulling him forward with cool ease, while the rest of his body remained immobile, was just wrong. Like his legs were the only thing that actually worked. I watched him disappear into the gloom, shaking my head. Where was this guy going? He sure as hell didn't live around here, or I'd recognize him, but I couldn't see another car nearby either. I sighed and leaned over towards the passenger side of my car, trying to spot out where he'd gone. I rolled up my window, leaning back and glancing forwards, and that's when I saw him. Still facing away, He was directly outside my window, not even an inch from the glass. I panicked and sped the car forwards, leaving him behind in the red hue of my taillights. All the time I let out horrified gasps. Oh my god. Oh my god. He was right outside the window. I'd only closed it a few seconds ago and he was instantly directly outside it. He was literal seconds away from being able to just grab me. I parked at my house and quickly stumbled towards the front door. I dropped the keys attempting to insert it into the door. Desperately scrambled to find them, then practically flung myself inside. I shut the door behind me and leaned against it, letting out ragged gasps. He almost had me. That son of a bitch almost had me. How did he even do that? How could he be so fast? I turned around, opening my mouth to call out that I was home, but stopped. He was there. He stood down the hall from me, staring at the far wall. I almost screamed as the keys fell from my hand and onto the floor. I felt like I was going to pass out, any state of rationality ebbing away as fast as lightning. "Babe?" Jasmine's voice called out. "You home already?" I didn't respond. As I watched, the man turned to the right and calmly slid into the guest room. I slid against the door, clutching my hands to my head. Jasmine stepped into the hallway and found me pointing and babbling incoherently. She followed my finger and checked the guest room, but of course there was nothing. What did I expect? As Jasmine tried to comfort me, I began to sob. Not out of guilt, not even out of terror, but out of hopelessness, because now I knew there was no escaping him. He was everywhere. He was around every corner, behind every door. I couldn't escape him no matter how hard I tried. And he was in my house. Dear God, he was in my house. The following morning, I reached a verdict after an incident. This needed to be dealt with. This had gone too far. I wasn't going to just try and put up with this on a day-to-day basis. The incident in question that conjured this verdict occurred when I was in the shower. It's one of those ones with glass walls making up this little cubicle, the glazed glass distorting the outside world like a Picasso. I stood under the warm water, running soap through my hair, when I glanced up and spotted him again. His still silhouette stood on the far side of the bathroom, next to the door and facing the wall as always. This time, I felt my muscles tense once again, but not as much. Eventually, you can become desensitized to even unexplainable entities stalking you. Still, I shrunk against the far corner of the shower, shivering and exposed. I don't know if it was me or some actual atmosphere this thing brought with it, but the water seemed to become progressively colder. The light seemed to become dimmer, giving the room an isolated and gray aura. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice quivering. Unsurprisingly, he didn't respond. I tried again. "I've got a decent amount of money in the bank." He then shot across the room towards me as fast as a bullet, his arms and legs staying rigidly by his side as he moved. It was a blink and you'll miss it moment. He was so damn fast, without his limbs actually moving at all, that I might have damn pissed myself for all I know. The moment he reached me, the glass walls around me violently exploded into dozens of deadly fragments. I shrieked and covered my head as they rained down on my unprotected body, slicing parts of my body into ribbons. I fell to the side, my exposed chest slamming into a broken carpet of glass that hungrily slipped into my skin like a knife into warm butter. As I watched a pool of my blood slowly spread across the bleached white tiles, I heard the door to the bathroom begin to frantically thud with the knocks of my surely concerned girlfriend. Babe? I heard glass breaking. Are you in there? Oh, shit. Babe? I looked up, all colors and shapes, curdling into inky blackness, and watched the man slowly drift towards the door, his limbs still not moving. He stopped an inch before it, before one arm sharply raised like a doll's arm, stiff and unnatural, and unlocked the door. Then, my head hit the tiles, and the last thing I heard was the door flying open. I came to in the hospital and was shortly accompanied by a doctor. He explained that I'd suffered some serious cuts, but that I was going to be fine. Mr. Hayes, how exactly did you manage to end up in that situation anyway? Did you just slip? The doctor asked. I didn't have a choice. If I told him the truth, he would either think I was pulling his leg or would plant me straight in the psychiatric ward. Yeah, I guess I just fell. It's been a rough few days, so I guess maybe I was just kinda unstable on my feet, you know? I explained. The doctor nodded, then continued to run through all that medical mumbo-jumbo. I went through the entire process, trying to remain calm. That sick thing. That man. He could have killed me. Maybe he was trying to. I ended up getting 23 stitches. Overall, I was okay, and there didn't appear to be any risk of infection or anything like that. Eventually, I was able to go home again, as my girlfriend gave me a lift. Jesus, Sam. What the hell are you doing in there? You could have fucking killed yourself, you know? She said. I'm sorry, beats having to go to work today. I joked. Jasmine smiled faintly and squeezed my hand. By the way, Jasmine, was I alone in the bathroom? I asked casually. Jasmine blinked, obviously confused. Yeah, of course, why? No reason, just confirming something. It's not that important. I'm just glad you're okay, she said. I thanked her, but my mind was on other things. He was directly injuring me. This thing. I needed help. But if not the police, who could I go to? Who might take me seriously? So I did what any stupid person would do when they have nowhere else to go and turn to the internet. I began to research whatever I could, looking for anything regarding men in suits stalking people. All I got was dumb conspiracy theories about men in black and the usual internet BS. I continued to search through the web, and as I got deeper into its contents, my concern and confusion grew. Every now and then, I would find a news article or a story on a chat forum, with certain details often disturbingly similar to my own experiences. I suppose that's what I wanted, some sort of understanding of my situation, but all it did was make me more distressed. One was a news article which read, "Mother on trial for drowning baby found in River Thames." Swallowing, I read through its contents. They were about as awful as you'd expect. This mother had been accused of drowning a 6-month-old baby in the bathtub, as she didn't want the kid in the first place, and according to her, it simply costed too much money. I don't know why the hell she didn't give the kid away to an orphanage, but after looking at a photo of her, I just concluded she was totally insane. Anyway, around the time she was being put on trial, she reported that a man in a suit was following her everywhere. I could feel the need to vomit again as, when asked to identify this man, she stated, "I can't. He always looks away." A couple days later, She vanished, and they eventually located her bloated body floating in the Thames. Police ruled it as suicide, but noted she appeared to have had an altercation with someone, as there were deep, inflicted gashes in her face and arms. I found another similar story, where some Twitter user who specialized in hunting apparently fatally shot a person by accident, thinking they were a deer. Legally, they were fine, as it was just a simple accident, and I think they had a pretty good lawyer too, but their hunting license was suspended for a while. In that time, they began to frantically post that they were being stalked, and some creep in a suit was breaking into their house, even when they'd locked all possible entrances. Finally, their last post was a link to a live stream. The live stream had since ended, but the video was somehow still up. In it, the guy confidently claimed that the activity had calmed down, and he was feeling safer. Then, he looked across the room and paused. His face changed, from dawning recognition to sudden panic. I watched disorienting, shaky camera footage as he instantly sprinted to his room and locked the door. He began to sob, telling the viewers that it had been standing on the other side of the room and had taken impossibly quick backward steps towards him. Moments later, the door to the bedroom burst open, and the guy let out this horrible scream, like this fucking animalistic, primal howl of absolute terror. Then the livestream ended as the camera flew out of his hands. I looked further into it, and apparently the guy was found in his room with his face completely blasted apart by a hunting rifle that shouldn't have even been on the property. The way the gun was positioned in his hands made the police again chart it up as a suicide. This time there were no remarks of any other person being there, and the video was assumed to be nothing more than evidence of a psychotic breakdown, despite him clearly not opening the bedroom door by himself in the video. At this point, I was just balled up in my seat. What the fuck was this thing? Did I really deserve this? All because of that simple accident. I continued to search, my thirst for answers growing, and finally I found a very dodgy looking chat room. On it, an anonymous person claimed to have evidence of this thing when I mentioned it and wanted to talk to me privately. I agreed, and we began a conversation. I started. I don't know if we're talking about the same thing, but something is following me. It has been for days. The user responded, never shows face. I responded, not once. Do you know what the fuck this thing is? The user did not respond for about 5 minutes. Finally, a reply. No. Jesus Christ, this whole situation was dumb. I'm sure there were way more logical ways of handling this, and here I was, in a chat room with someone who might just be toying with me. To be certain, I asked, "How can I trust you?" The reply was so fast, and it was like they knew I was going to ask it. You can't, but maybe you should. What does it want? Justice. I almost laughed out loud. What was this folktale bullshit? Justice my ass. I find that hard to believe. They all do. This is bullshit. I'm leaving, so thanks for wasting my time, jackass. You killed someone, didn't you? I stopped, my cursor hovering over the exit button. I could feel myself beginning to sweat, and that goddamn knot came back, so strong I couldn't believe it was just a result of my own emotions. And with it came the image of the head, that blood, that knotted hair. I could swear it was getting older too. The blood seemed blacker, rotting like curdled milk, and the skin was growing grayer and flakier. Hell, one of the eyes was missing. I shook my head, Confused as to why the image of the head became older even came to mind, then quickly thought of a response. Don't make me laugh. The response was quick. You did kill someone. I shook my head. I wasn't going to admit this. Who the hell did this person think they were? I swear I didn't. Anyway, just what the hell do I do? Confess. I shook my head. This asshole was starting to sound like the Jigsaw character from those torture porn flicks. I pounded in my response. Confess how? Confess to what you did. Make amends. Fuck this. I switched off the site, then double-checked that I hadn't received some kind of virus from it. That whole thing was a bullshit waste of time, I thought. I slammed my laptop shut, then crossed my bedroom to the window, looking out over my sunny neighborhood. I chewed nervously on my thumb as I tried to connect the dots. The woman drowned her kid. The woman ends up drowning. The hunter accidentally shoots a person. He ends up being shot. Jesus. What the hell am I going to do? I thought. I glanced at the sky, thinking heavily, then stumbled back from the window in shock. Slowly approaching it again, my hands shivering, I took in several horrified gasps. There he was, turned away. Yes, turned away and 50 feet in the fucking air. His feet were angled downwards but were perfectly level like he was standing on a solid surface. But he wasn't standing on anything. He was just there, in the middle of the goddamn open air, totally still. My grip on the windowsill tightened as I put a hand to my mouth. Obviously, this thing wasn't human, but any uncertainty that this was anything more than a mere person was gone. Something thumped behind me. I didn't even want to turn around, with my eyes glued to the man in the fucking sky, but I did it instinctively. At first, I didn't even think anything had changed. The man certainly wasn't in the room and nothing had moved. My eyes finally fixed on my bed and a small object sitting atop it. As I stared at it, a small red blotch, roughly the diameter of a tennis ball, began to spread beneath the object. A small red tendril, attached to this tiny orb on my bed, lay limply on my sheets like a dead worm. The same moment I acknowledged it was dripping with blood, I recognized what it was. I knew exactly who it belonged to as well. It was the fucking head's missing eye. Agatha's eye. It was staring at me like an accusing finger. It was staring right at me. I don't even know how it got into my house. Did he just walk straight into the coroner's office of the funeral's home or the graveyard or wherever the fuck Agatha's body was now and just pluck it out of her head? Jesus. Her head. At this point, it didn't even matter anymore. I'd just seen the bastard standing in the middle of the sky. Anything was possible. I did what I could about the eyeball and swept it into a plastic bag. I proceeded downstairs, out the front door, and to the bins out the front of my property. I chucked it away into the bin's stinking chasm without a second thought, trying to block out the incoming flood of memories and gut-twisting guilt, but it flooded in anyway. Those images playing over and over again, like a broken record. The corpse, the head, the man in the suit, the eyeball. Judgment. Judgment. Screw judgment. Screw justice. Screw rights and wrongs. I was a human being with my own life, my own family, my own passions. I had the right to be happy and free. I had the right to avoid unfair wrath for a simple thing I didn't even intend to happen. It was an accident. Plain and simple. It was just an accident. I glanced up from the bin as a familiar yellow vehicle pulled up across the street. It was my kid's bus, as he promptly hopped off it with a few other children. After the bus had trundled away, he crossed the street in my direction. "Hey, Reuben, you have a good day at school?" I asked, trying to maintain my composure. Reuben didn't respond. He kept walking, up the driveway, then past me, then into the house. I blinked, shook my head, and followed him inside. Reuben was heading up the stairs, not even removing his shoes. "Hey, Reuben, no wearing shoes in the house. Not even the ones with the rainbow laces. You don't want to get the carpet dirty," I warned him. Reuben, having reached the top step, stopped beside the banister and looked back down at me. He looked tireder still, the bags under his eyes heavy and a greenish purple. He was pale too, much paler than normal. The kid was starting to look sick, really sick. "I don't want to talk to you, Daddy," he croaked. "Hey, Reuben, what's wrong?" I asked. "Are you still having nightmares about the man?" "Don't lie." Reuben cut me off. He shuddered, starting to bite his bottom lip. I could now see that the kid was beginning to cry. "Stop lying to me. You're a bad liar. Jasmine's too nice to see it, but I see it. And he sees it. You're a liar, Daddy. You're a liar and a bad, bad person." I started to ascend the steps, trying to calm him down. "Reuben, you're sick. You're sick, and I don't think you know what—" "Shut up. You weren't like this before," Reuben yelled. I stopped, startled, as fresh tears started rolling down his face. "I know what you did, Daddy. He told me, and he showed me. Said he was going to show you, too." "Show you what?" I asked. "The eye, Daddy. Her eye." Reuben sobbed. "You weren't like this before, Daddy. I said so. You were good and nice and you cared, but you did something bad. You made a mistake and someone is dead and you won't take responsibility for it." Reuben screamed. He took a moment, sobbing uncontrollably, and pointed a little red finger at me. "You are not my dad. Not after what you did to us." "And what did I do to you?" I whispered. "You put us all in the hands of him," Reuben said. "Our family, and that's even worse than anything else." With that, my child turned on me and stormed into his room, slamming the door behind him. I ascended the stairs in a rage, ready to fling open the door and talk some sense into that brat, tell him he was talking nonsense, that he ought to apologize, but the door was already locked. I sighed, standing back, and shuffled into my room. I felt defeated, my shoulders slumped, my fingers shaking. I couldn't stop him. I couldn't stop this thing. Damn it, the kid was right. I couldn't stop this thing, and I'd thrust my family into this thing's clutches. I stripped the sheets off my bed to clean them as the afternoon slowly began to fade into evening, and after chucking them into the washing machine, I simply sat on the floor in front of the window and wondered what to do next. Everything felt pointless. One way or another, the man in the suit was gonna kill me. Maybe my family, but probably me, because it was my fault. I didn't want to accept it, but there it was. I was responsible. I did something terrible, and now it won't leave me alone. Not until I, as that online user said, make amends. I pondered wearily, wondering how it would be done. Then I heard the creak of my bedroom door behind me. I turned and found the thing to be shut. Didn't I leave it open before? I slowly stood, my eyes on the door. I didn't even bother approaching it. I knew what was going to happen anyway. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to face what I did, but I had to. Unless, I thought to myself, unless I could make a bargain. As if on cue, I felt his presence. It wasn't like in those stories of ghosts where the whole room becomes an icebox or anything. I just felt a shift in the atmosphere and the presence of someone standing behind me. I slowly turned, fearing the worst, and there he was. He stood before me even taller than I imagined. He was right up close. His stiff, rigid arms stuck directly out and clamped onto my shoulder, his grip heavy and strong. I saw the front of his suit. I saw his shoes pointed towards me. And at last, I saw it. I saw his face. I took in several breaths, panting, trying to speak, to cry and to scream all at once. As I struggled to emit any noise, rooted in place, his other arm raised like a machine, and his second claw-like hand lashed itself onto my other shoulder, fingers like knives viciously sinking into my skin. I felt my feet leaving the ground, my heels going, then my toes slowly being prized from the carpet, angled downwards, desperately trying to reconnect with the floor. He was lifting me up with ease, further and further, until finally we were face to face. But his face was not a face. It was a monstrosity. A huge smile split across his face, stretching so far that the tips of his mouth wrapped around the side of his face and disappeared. Dozens of disproportionately large, crooked teeth like a shark's filled his mouth, giving the impression that he was eating glass. It was a hideous mess of bleached broken mirrors and glinting razors, and could easily tear the toughest of flesh to thin, mangled strips. He had no nose, but instead, two thin little slits were gouged into his face as a feeble replacement for the nostrils. It looked almost like Voldemort's from Harry Potter, but the holes were longer and deeper, and almost painful to stare at because of how grotesque and mangled the warped skin deeper into his face looked. But the worst thing was his eyes. Where they should have been, a black, inky substance dripped from sockets reminiscent to a soulless void. Fat droplets crawled down his face like he was crying, contrasting against his skeleton-like smile. The sockets that produced this vile, dirty liquid gazed deep into my eyes, and his face on my shoulders began to tighten, squeezing harder and harder to the point that I feared my shoulder bones would begin to splinter. The fear that gripped me was raw and animalistic, the instinctive urge to flee, to try and live at whatever cost, taking over me entirely. I wanted to scream, was willing to tear my vocal cords apart if it could save me, but I couldn't. I was just so shocked, so frozen, a deer in the headlights. I now knew exactly how that hunter on the live stream felt. Terror, inexplicable terror, at heights I didn't even know existed. The face, the grip, the teeth, the eyes, the impending sense of doom was taking me over. But one thing terrified me most of all. It was something my father once told me about. If someone tries to rob you, or holds you at gunpoint, but they're wearing a mask, you might have a higher chance of living. But if you've seen their face, if they've let you look upon their facial details, your death is practically sealed, because that means they don't care if you see their face. They don't care because they're going to kill you anyway. That was how it felt. The whole time, This thing, this man, had been wearing a mask, but now he was letting me see it all. He was letting me see his face, and that meant I was going to die. He was going to kill me. As these thoughts ran through my head, his face began to change. The keen mess of teeth were slowly beginning to separate, the top part of his mouth lifting. The inside of his mouth looked like a bottomless pit, black and hideous. A huge pointed black tongue that slithered around like a fat, bloated worm lay at the base of his unforgiving maw. His mouth kept opening and opening and opening. I wanted to be sick. The upper part of his face, from the top lip and upwards, was gradually tilting further and further back, tilting much further than should have been possible, like part of his head was on a hinge. His mouth space just kept growing, heightening so far, that I was confronted with nothing but the harrowing, irregularly spaced shark teeth and the awaiting pit of his insides. Finally, his face stopped breaking apart, with the upper section cocked back at a full 90-degree angle. And now, I was being tilted forward, being tipped in the direction of the hungry, cruel abyss. I knew what was going to happen. He was going to bite off my head, like the mother who was drowned after drowning her kid, and the hunter who was shot after shooting a person. I was going to be decapitated for decapitating a driver, and God knows I deserved it. I deserved it, but I didn't want it. I didn't want fate. I had a family. I had a girlfriend who was my love, a kid who was my world. I wanted to live. By God, I wanted to live. And so I did the only thing I thought I could do. I'm sorry, I gasped in a barely audible voice. I'm so sorry. If I could take it back, if I could change it, I would. Please don't kill me. I want to live. I want to live. Tears streamed down my face as my head drew ever closer to the abyss. The black, empty world of callous judgment. The end of my life. I'll take whatever sacrifice is necessary. I'll go to the police. I'll turn myself in. I'll apologize to her family. I'll do it. I will. I swear I will, and if I don't, you can kill me then. No matter what I say. I will take responsibility for what I've done. I will face judgment. I will make amends as best as I can. I know it's too late to do much, but I will do it. Please do anything to me. Take my fingers, drive me insane. Whatever the sacrifice, just please let me live. And I promise, I really promise, I will make amends. I will make amends. I promise. My head, inches from the gaping mouth, was halted. The hands held me in place, the seconds ticking by. Then, I was being pulled backwards, and the face was resealing itself. At last, I was held in place before him once more, that sickening face staring searchingly into my eyes. I repeated myself once more time in a shuddering whisper. I'll accept whatever sacrifice is necessary, and I promise I will make amends. His hands released me. I slammed into the floor like a sack of potatoes, groaning with pain. I looked back up, but he was gone. The room was empty, with just me, a snotty, teary mess lying in a heap on the floor. I slowly righted myself upon quivering knees and looked to my bedroom door. It was open again, allowing me out into the warmly lit hallway beyond. I wept silent tears of joy and gratitude and proceeded downstairs into the kitchen. The night was almost fully dark out now, but I didn't care. I was alive. I could move, speak, breathe, and live. I could live. I sat at my counter, looking around at everything as I thought the same thing over and over. I can live. The images of her head, the eyeball, the body. It was still there, still bringing the pained knot of guilt, but the knot was less painful, the images less confronting. I was going to accept justice. I was going to make amends for what I'd done. Taking a swig of fresh, cold beer, I headed back up the stairs after a good half hour of relieved sobbing, then cleaning myself up. My phone was in my room on the bedside table. I would call the authorities, state my name, where I lived, and what I'd done. That was the plan, but as I reached the top step, I glanced to my right and frowned. The door to a certain room was open, and I knew for a fact that it wasn't open before. Cautiously approaching it, I stared inside. The room in question was an old office that was no longer used. It belonged to my late wife, Maud. Remember that woman I mentioned once at the very start of the whole thing? Yeah, her. The office was once hers, but after cancer did its thing, I simply stopped using the room. I never thought about cleaning it out, though it just acted as a reminder of a beautiful woman in my life. Inside the room in question, on the desk sat Maud's laptop. It was open, plugged in, and it was on. I frowned, curiously entering the room. Perhaps Reuben had been toying around with it, but that didn't seem right. Reuben would never do something like that. I stared down at what was on the computer screen, and as I did, a dawning realization began to take over. I felt my breathing begin to change, felt my grip on the chair beneath the desk tighten. I recognized what was on the computer, but it couldn't possibly be. It was the dodgy chat room, the one I had been using to communicate with the anonymous user. There were messages on it too, messages that I recognized. The person who was being messaged from my wife's computer had written words, the very same words I had written to the anonymous user. The anonymous user had been using my wife's computer. But who would do that? Of course, him. It was him, the man. I'd been talking to the man in the fucking suit. I stumbled back against the wall, reading the written words sent from the computer's side. You killed someone, didn't you? You did kill someone. Confess. My eyes drifted to the section where you could write and send your messages. Yeah, I can't remember what it's called. There were words sitting in the section on sent. As my eyes drifted over them, I muttered under my breath, No, 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 no. Jasmine. The words read, Jasmine is the sacrifice. You'll find her where Agatha died. Don't try to save her. I took in hitching gasps, stumbling to the doorway. Fuck that. Fuck sacrifices. I couldn't let him take her. I couldn't. I couldn't. I sprinted down the stairs, calling out Jasmine's name frantically. When she didn't respond, I checked the backyard. My hands began to tremble, tears brimming, when I did not locate her in the early night's gloom. No, 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 please no. God, no. I whimpered. Jasmine. I sprinted to my car, starting up the engine and speeding down the road. Panic-stricken, I pulled out my phone, frantically sending Jasmine texts whenever I reached a red light or stopped behind a stalled vehicle. Jasmine, please respond. Tell me you're okay. Jasmine, are you reading this? Please, please respond. Right now, please. I can't lose you. Please. Where are you? Jasmine? Jasmine. I pulled onto the highway, picking up speed. The world became a frenzy of slashes of light and the brief clamor of horns. I didn't care. All I cared about was her. I loved her. I wouldn't lose her too. It wasn't fair. By God, it wasn't fair. I continued to press down on the gas, going faster and faster. So fast that if a car stopped and I ran into it, both of us would be practically obliterated. A mess of shattered bones and bleeding skins. But the only person I was fearful for was Jasmine. Please, please God, let her live. The area in which the crash occurred was just up ahead. As I continued to hurtle down the road, I stamped down on the gas as hard as I could, my white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel shaking with hysteria. I feared the worst. I feared she was dead. I feared she was in agony, writhing and screaming, not knowing why she was in the hellish position she was in, not knowing that I was responsible, not knowing that my selfish actions following a horrible incident had resulted in this, was resulting in this. And then, Jasmine responded to my messages with a call. I looked down and jammed my thumb aggressively on the accept call button. As soon as I did, I almost began shouting, Jasmine, Jasmine baby, tell me you're okay. Please tell me you're okay. Where are you? Can you tell me where you are, Jasmine? Jasmine, in a confused voice, responded, Babe, I'm fine. Calm down. I'm just at the store getting milk. Sorry, my phone was off and in my purse. Are you okay? What's wrong? I glared down at my phone in disbelief. What was happening? I looked back up, almost dead on the spot where the incident had occurred, and that's when something stumbled in front of me. I yelled, slamming my foot down on the brakes, but it was already too late. Whatever it was hit by my car with a dull thunk and went spinning into the darkness, leaving a bloody smear on the front of my car. I continued to jam down on the brakes, the all too familiar racket of squealing tires and howling horns surrounding me once again as my car fully rolled to a stop. This time, I did not cower and cover my head. I looked around at the ensuing carnage, watched cars swerve and whirl aggressively, watched one mount the barrier and diagonally skid along, sending up a harsh spray of sparks as it went. It lasted a good 10 seconds. I simply sat there, my hands on the wheel, reliving the sickening experience of carnage and terror. When it was dead silent, I pushed my car door open. I wasn't just going to drive away again. I couldn't. I needed to know what I'd done. I planted a foot onto the road, moving mechanically, stepping into the frigid night air. All around me there were slanted beams of light, courtesy of headlights, pointing every which way. I set my eyes forward, each step towards the front of my car, feeding into a sense of mounting dread. Step by step by step, my anxiety heightening endlessly. What had I done? Who was it this time? Was it even a who? Perhaps it was an animal. At last, my eyes rested on the scene sat before me. A pickup truck was a little distance ahead of me, taking up 2 lanes as it had swerved to a violent stop. Glass panes being transported on the back of the truck had been cracked and shifted around. with several broken sheets jutting out threateningly. Hanging over the road, one fractured pane had an ugly smear of dark crimson on its edge, thick droplets of blood oozing onto the road, fat balls of scarlet dripping one at a time onto the asphalt. Drip, 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 drip. My eyes settled on the figure laying beneath the glass panes, bathed in harsh fluorescent headlights. I stared at it for a very long time. I tried to speak, but then I took in breath after breath after breath, and at last I began to scream. I began to scream so loud, letting out horrified howls of agony and terror. I shrieked up at the sky, tears streaming down my face, wailing in anguish, my entire face contorted in despair. I shrieked so loud my throat felt like it was tearing itself apart, but I didn't care. I was too horrified to care. Because despite the cracked and broken limbs, despite the absolute mess of blood they were covered in, despite the torn clothing and the fractured fingers, despite the body parts being turned around at impossible angles, with split skin and bones snapped like twigs, despite the complete lack of a head, torn mercilessly from the body and leaving only thin strips of skin behind, I knew who it was. I knew exactly who it was. It was more roadkill than human, and it was missing its head entirely, but I knew exactly who it was. And do you know how I knew who it was? Because of those little rainbow shoelaces.